Hello and welcome back to the channel. On this video, I'm going to be talking about all of the books that I hope to read in the month of February 2025. And I'm going to start, as always, with the books that I didn't get to in the previous month. And then I will talk about some pre-selected books that I have on my list. And then I'm going to choose 5 random books using an alphabet letter that I will choose from a jar. And then I will pick 5 books from my backlist on Kindle. And that will round out the books that I'm hoping to read this month. So first, the books I did not get to in January. I had, 1, 2, 3 that I didn't get to. The first one is one that I've had on my list for a very long time, but I promise I have a justification as to why I did not get to this book. It is called Heavenly Bodies by Imani Aru. I was going to try to get to this book in January because the audiobook came out in January, and I was hoping to finally get to this book. It's been months and months and months that it's been on my list. And I have the book on ebook as well. And I thought I'm going to listen to the audio and read the ebook because it has kind of a complicated, plot. There's world building. And I thought, okay, I'm going to do, both of these at the same time. So I start the audiobook and I have the ebook out, and they are not matching. I think the audiobook is a different version of the book that is newer. It was traditionally published, which is why it became an audiobook. Whereas the ebook that I had was kind of like the one that was on Kindle Unlimited. It was like independently published. And so I was like, okay, I'm going to pause and see if I can track down the newer version of this book in a physical copy or an ebook. And so I was able to get it from my library, but I don't have it yet. So I decided to set that aside until I have the copy of the book that I can actually read while I'm listening to it to make sure I'm fully understanding what's going on. So that will wait until a future month. Not sure I'm going to get to it in February either. It'll depend on when I can get this copy of this book into my hand. I put it on hold. The second book I didn't get to, although I started it, is one called The Children's Book by A.S. Byatt. And this is basically a very long kind of literary novel about a children's author who I think it's just like about the relationships around this person. It reminded me a little bit of like Kate Morton. If you've read any of her novels, it had kind of a similar kind of like tone and feel to it. And I don't even know how far into it, maybe like 10%. And then I just got pulled away, and we'll have to finish it in February. So I did have it on audio, and I have it on ebook as well. And it's pretty long. I think it's, 600 pages long. Let me see if I can. Yeah, 675. So it's one that I would definitely want to listen to on audio. And then the third book that I wasn't able to get to is a reread of All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And I have read this book a couple of times. One of the times I read it most recently, I actually had the flu. This was last year, and I just don't remember much from it. And I want to watch the adaptation on television. And so I want to read the book again before I watch the adaptation. So I have that on my list still. Okay, let's dive into the books that I have on my list for February. The first one is one that I'm actually continuing also from January, but I'm reading it throughout the entire year. It's called Daily Creative by Todd Henry, and it has kind of like everyday essays on creativity by this author who I've read before and really enjoyed. And I read the different daily essays throughout January, and then I will continue to read them throughout February and the remaining months of this year. So that's going to stay on my list pretty much all year long. I also added the first 3 books in Catherine Cowell's Tattered and Torn series. They are called Tattered Stars is the first book. The second book is called Falling Embers. And then the third book in the series is called Hidden Waters. And Catherine Cowell's is kind of known for kind of like a romance suspense subgenre. She typically has kind of these small town narratives, interconnected characters, and I'm guessing this is more of the same. This is one of the series from her backlist that I just haven't read. And given that it's February, which happens to be Valentine's Day, I thought I would add some romances into my pile for this month. So that's one of the series that I'm working through. Another series that I added, and this was actually on, both of those I think are on my 25 for 2025 list. I have like series and different books I'm trying to read this year. The second series that I'm going to mention is also on that list. It is the Lark Cove series by Devney Perry. And this is a 5-book series that, again, Devney Perry is also known for kind of like small town romance, sometimes romance suspense. And I've been like slowly working my way through her backlist just because I really have enjoyed her work. So the 5 books in this series, the first one is called Tattered. The second book is called Timid. The third book is called Tragic. The fourth book is called Tinsel, and the fifth book is called Timeless. So all of those are on my list for the month of February. I also have the second two books in the Prisoner Healer series by Lynette Noni, and I reread The Prison Healer, which is the first book in this series, in January. So I just finished that book, and I'll take up the second two books in this series in February. So the second book is called The Gilded Cage, and the third book is called The Blood Trader. And I really enjoyed the first book. I've heard great things about the series, so I'm looking forward to finishing that up. I also added to my list a book called The Kind Worth Killing by Peter Swanson. And I've just been wanting kind of like a good mystery suspense novel. And I saw somebody online who was really like raving about this trilogy. She really enjoyed it and was saying how sad she was that it was done. So I thought I would pick up the first book and then maybe pick up the second two books later on in the year. Okay, then I've got a bunch more romance. So I added Fall With Me by Becca Mack. This is the fourth book in the Playing for Keeps series, which you may remember if you've watched my previous videos. This is a series about interconnected hockey players who have different romances throughout the series. And I believe this is the fourth and final book in the series. So I will pick that up this month. I also picked up a book called Off the Hook by Julie Olivia. And I read a Julie Olivia book in December. I think it was December. She writes also kind of romance, often like interconnected stories. This one, I believe, is based off of like Peter Pan, and she's got some like tropes from Peter Pan and characters that she's using from that story. So looking forward to that. I've really enjoyed, she also has a series about interconnected romances that take place in a theme park, and those are also really fun. So that's a February read for me. I'm also going to pick up a backlist of Lucy Score called Pretend You're Mine. This is the first book in her Benevolent series. And I've just kind of slowly been working my way back through Lucy Score's list. There are several books that I have not gotten to yet, but I've really enjoyed kind of her short series and also her standalones. And then I also added Rebecca Yarros has a book called Variation. And you may know Rebecca Yarros from her Fourth Wing reputation, because that's a huge book that's out there. Variation was a book that she wrote in between the second and third book in that Fourth Wing series. The third book, Onyx Storm, came out in January. And I'm not quite ready to commit to reading those three books because I'm going to reread, of course, Fourth Wing, Iron Flame, and then the third book. And so I didn't want to squeeze that into February or January. So I will be reading all of those later in the year. But Variation is a romance novel that she wrote in the midst of writing these other ones that I've heard really, really good things about. So I'm going to pick that up as well. I also decided to pick up a couple other Devney Perry books that are in like a duology that is called Mason Jar. The first is called The Birthday List, and the second is called Letters to Molly. I think these might have even been written at a time when she was like using a pen name. And so this is like back in her backlist. And so I thought I would pick those up as well. And then just a few more. I picked up a book called Reverse the Search by Madeline Mann. This is a book that I am committing to reading more books from NetGalley, which is basically a platform where you can get advanced readers' copies of books. And this particular book, I decided to pick up. The subtitle is How to Turn Job Seeking into Job Shopping. I decided to pick this up because I have a coaching kind of side practice, and I often work with people who are doing career-based decision making, and they're kind of like going on the job market. And so I wanted to take a look at this and see if there was anything helpful for when I'm working with my coaching clients. And then the last two books I have on my predetermined list, one is called Once Smitten, Twice Shy. This is the third book in the Wilmot Sisters series by Chloe Leese. And these are all books that are based off of Shakespeare plays, and she kind of rewrites them with modern day characters. Each book follows a sister of three sisters. So this is the third book. It's kind of a trilogy, and it will round out the other two books that I've read in this series that I really enjoyed. And let me just see if I can figure out which Shakespeare play. It's based off of Twelfth Night. So if you're familiar with that storyline, this book is based off of that. And then the final book that I have on my predetermined list is a book called Slow Dance by Rainbow Rowell. And I have read this author many times and really enjoyed her books. This, I think, is like one of her most recent, but it looks like it's about a couple of people who meet in high school, and then I think they come back together in like their early 30s. and decide if they're going to like have a relationship together. So Rainbow Rowell typically writes, I would say, like contemporary romance. She also wrote a trilogy, which I hope to read later this year, that's kind of a queer version of Harry Potter. And that's another one that she's kind of known for as well. So looking forward to picking that up. And now I'm going to go ahead and navigate to my Kindle list and pick the random letter that is going to tell me what books I'm going to read in February. But first I'm going to navigate to the alphabetical list here in my Kindle. So sorting by title, I'm going to go ahead and pick my random letter. And I went ahead and added all of my letters back in for 2025. So I have all kinds of things I can choose from here. And the random letter I have chosen is T. So now that I have that, let me navigate to the T section of the titles and see what I might want to add. So I'm going to choose 5 books from this section of my Kindle that I have not yet read. All right, there are a ton of good things in here. This is going to be kind of hard to actually pick. Okay, the first book I'm going to choose is a nonfiction book. It is called The Talent Code by Daniel Coyle. And this is a book that I believe is basically about kind of like nurturing people within your organization into being like talent that can like move up through your organization. And I'm always interested in kind of like talent development. So I'm going to go ahead and add this to my list for February. The next book I'm going to add is, I'm trying to remember what this is about. I think I've heard really good things about this. It's a book called Talking at Night by Claire Deverly. I don't think I've ever read this author before. And basically it's about 2 people who meet as teenagers and they're opposites. The male is her twin brother's wild and unpredictable friend. And then it says one day tragedy strikes, their future together is shattered. But as the years roll on, they can't help but find their way back to each other. This actually sounds a little bit like the Slow Dance book, but I have heard good things about this, so I'm going to add this to my list as well. I am also going to add a book that I've heard about for a long time and just haven't had a chance to get to. It's called The Things We Cannot Say. And this is a World War II historical fiction novel. It takes place in 1942. And it says there's a woman who, since she was 9 years old, she knew she would marry her best friend. Now 15 and engaged, she's unconcerned by reports of Nazi soldiers at the Polish border. But then it says, basically, I think this fiance of hers disappears, and she's trying to measure time between visits from her beloved and measures the space between hope and despair, waiting for word from him and avoiding the attentions of soldiers who patrol her parents' farm. So it says basically it's slipping between Nazi-occupied Poland and the frenetic pace of modern life. So it must be kind of, I don't know, like a, maybe it's back and forth between like present day and the past. I'm picking this one up. Okay, so World War II historical fiction novel, adding that to my list. I am also going to add another nonfiction book. It is called This Is Strategy by Seth Godin. This is his most recent book, I think. And I love books on strategy. And I've heard kind of mixed reviews on this one. So I thought I would pick this up and just see what I think. So I'm going to give that my own like review of what I think of that one. And the last book that I'm going to pick, the last T book I'm going to pick, is one called To the Gorge. This is by Emily Hallman. And I have been following this person actually for a while on social media. She's a trail runner, and she also does like ultra marathons. And she wrote this book about grief, which is about kind of the death of her mother. And I've been wanting to get to this one for a long time, and I haven't had a chance to read it yet. So I'm going to add that one to my February list as well. So that is my pile. That is my to be read pile for February 2025. A good pile. I'm looking forward to seeing how that goes. And I hope you'll check back at the end of the month and see which books I was able to complete. Until then, happy reading.